Hello and welcome to India's World. There is a civil war raging in Iraq and no one knows how it might end. The jihadist army of the Al-Qaeda-inspired Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, or ISIS, has captured several cities north of Baghdad. The US, having pulled out of Iraq completely 3 years ago, is once again considering military assistance to Iraq to fight the jihadis. President Barack Obama has ruled out sending US troops to Iraq again, but has promised military assistance. The Iraqi regime has specifically requested air support, including drone strikes. It is increasingly clear, however, that the US policy of first invading Iraq and then pulling out completely in a hurry has come unstuck. To discuss the failure of America's Iraq policy and its long-term consequences, we have with us a distinguished panel of experts who are experts on the region, who have served in that region. We have with us Ambassador Ranjit Singh Kalha. He was India's ambassador to Iraq in the years preceding US invasion of Iraq. We have Ambassador Ranjit Gupta. He was India's ambassador to Yemen. He was also ambassador to Oman. He's also served in Saudi Arabia. And he was in charge of West Asia and North Africa division of Ministry of External Affairs when he was in service. And we are also lucky to have with us Mr. Shahid Mahdi. He's the former Vice Chancellor of Jamia Millia Islamia. He has worked with the UN in West Asia and an expert on the region. So I welcome all of you to this discussion. Ambassador Kalha, let me begin with you. Let's go back in history a bit and see to what extent today's crisis in Iraq is the result of US intervention in that country. Now, before the US invaded Iraq, it was a functioning nation state. Today it's on the verge of disintegration. It was ruled by a secular, although dictatorial Saddam Hussein. Today it is ruled by a sectarian Shiite leader who is also dictatorial, Noor al-Maliki. It had religious freedom earlier. Shias, Sunnis, Christians could stay together. Today, the Shias are fighting Sunnis. Women had freedom earlier. Today, women can be shot if they don't cover their faces in some cities of Iraq. There was no Al-Qaeda in Iraq earlier. Today, there's a force which is worse than Al-Qaeda, more violent than Al-Qaeda. Iraq was not a terrorist threat. Today, Iraq is a terrorist threat. Iraq was a functioning economy. It produced oil. It was one of the largest producers of oil. Today, it's unable to pump oil. So, in retrospect, what did the US achieve by invading Iraq?
See, US policy in the Middle East, and particularly as far as Iraq is concerned, has always rested on two main fulcrums. The first one is the safety and security of Israel, and the second one is to ensure the unimpeded export of oil from the Gulf region. Now, the dilemma which the US has faced is that a strong Iraq is prone to take steps which are inimical to the interests of Israel. But a weakened Iraq becomes prey to more ambitious neighbors such as Iran. So therefore, what to do with Iraq has always been the American dilemma. Now, if you see in the earlier stages, Saddam was, when he came to power, some say that he came with CIA help. And if you see the old records, which are now freely available, he was very much close to the Americans. In fact, even there are documents to suggest that his attack on Iran was cleared with the American administration before he launched his attack. The problem arose that after the Iran war, Saddam became too powerful. Having successfully defended and perhaps weakened Iran substantially, he became too powerful. And he made a fundamental mistake in that he started threatening Israel, that I will fire chemical weapons, I'll destroy you, I'll take you out of the, push you into the Mediterranean Sea. This is something the Americans could never allow. So they got their opportunity when he invaded Kuwait. And of course, he was driven out of Kuwait. There was no doubt that he would be driven out of Kuwait. But subsequently, the Americans realized that he was a stabilizing factor in that region. And they continued to, of course, stare him down and put him in a corner, but at the same time did nothing to destabilize him. I remember when I was there, one would read in the newspapers that they've launched missile attacks, they've done various other things. But on the ground, one saw nothing much happened. And missiles would come, they would hit some odd bunker here and there, but never substantially reduced his strength. And this position continued until George Bush II arrived on the scene. And that, of course, then is another story.
Okay. Ambassador Gupta, we've had this analysis of what happened before George Bush came. But when George Bush went in, he also said that America was going on a nation-building project there. What kind of a nation-building was it which left millions of people dead, millions without livelihood, and a country completely in disarray?
Well, may I first of all begin with the aftermath of Saddam's invasion of Kuwait.
Yeah, but quickly, please.
Because then there was a policy of dual containment of both Iran and Iraq.
Okay.
And there was a conscious attempt to keep this Saddam's power in check. There were no-fly zones and all kinds of things were imposed upon Iraq. Then Iraq was described along with Iran and North Korea as part of the axis of evil.
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
So the American intentions were absolutely clear. It's not about nation building. They provide rhetoric to justify their policies and objectives.
But my question was, did they achieve their policy objectives?
It was a complete failure. Okay. Their intention was to destroy Iraq, and they have succeeded in destroying Iraq, whatever their rhetoric may have been.
So it was not a failure, it was a success then. They wanted to destroy
It was a success.
Iraq. Yeah.
It was a success. They wanted to destroy Iraq so that it's not only Israel, it is the GCC friends also, Saudi Arabia.
Okay. Now, let me ask a slightly different question, Mr. Mahdi. Why is it that no political leader in US, the perpetrator of this horrendous crime against humanity, I know of no other phrase to describe it, has been brought to book? I mean, tin-pot dictators of all kind are plucked from nowhere and tried in the International Court of Justice. But George Bush, Dick Cheney, Donald Rumsfeld, are they any less responsible for civilian deaths than Saddam Hussein ever was?
You see, basically, even in international law, I mean, whatever I say, might is right. That's it. I mean, if you are thinking that the International Court of Justice or other things, there will be some trial.
Or even the US civil society itself, US democracy ought to punish them. I think defeating George Bush was a punishment
My feeling
enough?
is that the US civil society also has changed over the years. It is not the same society which was against the Vietnam War, you see. So that also has, as our society is also changing.
Or do they think that US objectives in Iraq have been fulfilled by
Yes, if
George
they believe the Fox News and the media, yes. You see, the power of media. And you know, who are the people who own media in US? I mean, it's not a secret. Whether it is Hollywood or the
all
channels.
The architects of that program till today continue to passionately defend the policy from 2003 onwards. This speaks for itself.
Yes. All right. We need to take a break at this point. No. I'll come back to you. I'll come back to you after this. We need to take a break at this point. We'll continue with this interesting discussion in a bit. Don't go away. Welcome back. We're discussing US policy failures in Iraq, although some of my panelists think it was a great success. But let me come back to you. I had interrupted you before the break, Mr. Mahdi.
Yeah. I mean, I entirely agree with you that part of this whole business is the hidden agenda is the Israel, you see. And let's also think why last 5-6 years this whole Sunni Shia business has started. I mean, if you go back to say 20 years or 30 years, or even if Iraq under Saddam, the Kurds were there. I mean, for example, in the UN, their representatives were Kurds. The Shias were there, the Sunnis were there. Of course, the Shias sometimes felt that some of their religious fervor was being suppressed. But my feeling is that it was not so much on the religious grounds, but because it could pose some kind of a menace for the regime. Of late, you see, after the Iranian Revolution, again the whole thing has under the microscope. And it's very interesting that last 10 years, there's a spate of books which are coming from US about who the Shias are, how this whole business is started from the time of the Caliphate of Ali and all these things. And also this kind of division that we are seeing. But I think the beneficiary of all this is basically one state.
Is what, sorry?
Only one state
One
is
state,
the
which is?
beneficiary of all this in the West Asian scenario.
Israel.
Yes, let's name it.
Yeah, no, I was wondering which was the state. Let me ask you a slightly different question, Ambassador Gupta. You remember in the run-up to 2003, in the Vajpayee government, there were voices which were suggesting that we should join the US expeditionary forces in Iraq. In retrospect, do you think we were wise to sort of step back?
Not only wise, but very lucky, I would say, because there were very passionate arguments that time in favor. You know, it was an 11th hour decision. It could have gone either any way.
Exactly.
It was very, very lucky that that saner voices prevailed and we did not join this complete misadventure.
Okay. Ambassador Kalha, let's come back to the present. Do you think the US decision to end the war in Iraq was its biggest success in Iraq in many ways of the Obama regime? But even that decision is now threatened because Obama is talking about re-engaging with Iraq militarily, although without putting boots on the ground.
You see, the reason why they terminated their engagement in Iraq was because it was going nowhere. And the objectives for which they had come were not going to be met. So they had decided to cut their losses and move away. Now that they are talking in terms of intervention, not boots on the ground, but by interdiction by air, I think is a red herring because frankly speaking, I don't think they are that interested.
Yeah.
Because I have seen, even when I was there, that they used to undertake missile attacks against Saddam, but basically were ineffective. And I don't think that you are going to be able to be a very effective counterbalance to the insurgents. Because you see, you mustn't forget, Iraq is 90% desert. It has 3 main cities or 4 main cities. The rest of the countryside is absolutely empty. The reason why people covet Iraq is not because of the countryside or because of the beautiful cities, etc. It's because of the oil. And you can't, control this kind of movements by air.
Okay. How reluctant, Ambassador Gupta, would Obama be to re-involve America in Iraq?
I don't think he has a choice. And quite frankly, in my view, for the first time, I would say that it is desirable for the United States to get involved. They have created the mess. And they have a moral responsibility because these are very large formations which are moving, which are can be very easily hit from the skies by air attacks, by drone attacks. Maliki has asked for international involvement. I think this is a fit case now against the ISIL or ISIS, both names are used, for an international effort, UN-sanctioned effort. It should not be unilateral.
Okay.
And it is a fit case.
Okay. Mr. Mahdi, one of the things that Obama administration has done is that it has said that it will work with the US Congress to set up a counter-terrorism assistance fund which will fulfill, and I quote, which will provide flexibility and resources to help Iraq respond to emerging needs as the terrorist threat from ISIS continues to evolve, unquote. Now, does this mean that the US does not expect the ISIS to disappear but to evolve? And 2, that it believes that an already cowed down Iraqi army, which is running in the face of the jihadi forces, can be bolstered through airstrikes?
No, this airstrike will...
Or counter-terrorism fund?
No, I think this fund, I mean, how can you... I mean, this whole idea of the fund business, as if, you see, if there is a counter-terrorism fund, there is a terrorism fund also, which is limitless from certain countries. It can come. See, all this appears to be very, very naive to me. You see, the basic thing is that the West should realize that whatever is happening in Syria and Iraq poses a danger for them also. Because you will be surprised to know, perhaps, or perhaps you already know, that a number of people in the ISI, I mean, it is something like ISI, etc.
ISIS.
They are from European countries also. So the virus, you see, which is being let loose in Syria, is spreading all over. And who is gaining? Finally, you see, if you want to contain Iran, perhaps you have to do something here.
Yeah.
Otherwise, Iran is a natural intervener in this whole business.
Okay. Now, let me take the Iran question to
Yes.
you, Ambassador Kalha. Iran is already bolstering Iraqi forces by sending, they've sent 2 divisions of the Quds force of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. Now, might a situation arise where US decides to have airstrikes? I'm not saying it will decide, but suppose it decides to go for airstrikes, that US actually would be providing air cover for Iranian troops on the ground.
Well, you see, we have to understand the situation. The reason why the Iraqi army is fleeing in the north is because the north is almost entirely Sunni.
Yes.
And therefore, they find themselves in a very untenable situation because the present Iraqi army is mainly Shiite. They know that if they are caught either by the insurgents or by the local population, they have no way out. So they simply abandon their guns and run away from there. The second factor is the Maliki government and its armed forces are no less brutal than the jihadis were. In fact, there are reports where the people in Mosul and in other areas have welcomed the jihadis because they are a lesser evil than the Shiite army of Iraq. Now, of course, once the Iraqi army comes to the main Shiite areas, which are Baghdad and south of Baghdad, it will be a very different, situation because they will be able to hold their own because the Shiites are no less fighters. But here, it was like a fish out of water.
Okay.
The basic flaw, I think, in the state building is that Iraq is an artificial country created after the First World War and all these things, in one sense. So many ethnicities, religion and all these things. The present regime in Iraq has not been able to take a pluralistic view of the whole thing.
Yeah.
And it is too much aligned to, so there is some kind of a majoritarianism which has been dominating the whole
It's a
the whole
Shiite
business.
government.
Yeah.
In fact, they've done ethnic cleansing in Baghdad also.
So I think there is a lesson from India that, you see, how a pluralistic approach, how a nation building, how Saddam was perhaps within quotes evil, but he took everybody together. So this is perhaps one of the major flaws, in my view, that has to be rectified.
All right. We need to take a break.
If the
We need to take a break at this point. We'll continue with this interesting discussion after the break. Don't go away. Welcome back. We are discussing US policy failures in Iraq. Let's talk about the present. What's happening in Iraq now, Ambassador Gupta? The army of this Islamic State of Iraq and Syria had captured some territory in Syria, in western parts, for the last 2.5 years, and they were there. But what are the factors that created an opportune moment for them to push eastwards in Iraq?
Actually, the ISIS or ISIL is primarily a creation in Iraq first. They went from there to Syria. It's not the other way around. And their ambition is to create an Islamic emirate, pure Islamic emirate in the areas between Syria and Iraq.
Yeah. Did they capture territory first in Syria?
Yes, yes. And of course, ISIS has captured territory in Iraq now. But they were all over the place. But they've actually captured territory now.
So what made it possible for them to capture territory now and not earlier?
Because they had gained so much more experience fighting in Syria. They had gained so much more weaponry.
Yeah.
Because people were surrendering. Now in Mosul, they've got $400 million in gold. This is only going to strengthen them immensely. But talking about Iran, ironically, on the one hand, of course, the nuclear negotiations are going on. Here, a situation may well develop where the interests of the United States and Iran coincide. Whom are you fighting? You are fighting, it's not a question of Sunni only. You are fighting extremist, radical Sunni extremists who are against everybody. Okay. And even Saudi Arabia and the other GCC countries are extremely afraid of radical Islam. They are very anti-ISIS. Yeah. So
But they have been supporting them.
No, they have not been supporting them. They've been supporting Jabhat al-Nusra and others, not ISIS.
No, but
ISIL.
Gulf countries have been.
No Gulf country supports ISIL as a country officially. There may be individuals.
Okay, now let me ask you a slightly different question. Now, do you think the game plan of ISIS or this Islamic State of in Syria and Levant, as it is often also called, its aim is to, in pushing eastwards in Iraq, its aim is to force Iranians to reallocate their military resources from Syria to Iraq so that they get some breathing space in Syria, where things have reached a stalemate?
It's quite possible because don't forget on their journey from Mosul towards Baghdad, they've also been joined in by the remnants of Saddam's army, which was basically Sunni oriented. In fact, the Tikrit fell with a telephone call. You didn't even have to
that's Saddam's hometown.
Absolutely. You didn't even have to push any soldiers into it. So therefore, what is emerging in that area now is the fact that all the Sunni sort of malcontent which were against the Maliki government seem to have combined together. Okay. And they seem to be saying that, okay, if we can't get the whole of Iraq, at least we'll get what is our area. Okay. And we won't let any, Iraqi army of Maliki come in. Okay. And that
you were vehemently shaking your head when Ambassador Kalha was speaking. So do you disagree with him?
Not with him. Your presumption or assumption.
Okay, what is that? Tell me.
What
I said that the ISIS game plan could be to redistribute force redistribution of Iranian military resources.
No.
Get them to focus on
I don't think
Iraq.
that is their intention at all. They are sufficiently strong on the ground. Okay. In the Sunni areas of Iraq, the Iranians are not there. They are unlikely to get there. But Iranians will come to hold the Shia holy places and Baghdad. Yeah. They will not go into the Sunni areas.
They moved into the mixed areas like Diyala and Kirkuk.
In Kirkuk Kirkuk has been taken by the Kurds, by the Peshmerga.
Yeah.
By the Peshmerga
of the Kurds.
Of the Kurds.
See, the number of the ISI's forces is very small. I think 15,000 or so.
Maximum all over, including Syria and Iraq.
This is the figure we are.
So this is local support really.
But no, it's not local. It is local apathy, I would say, and local interests. For example, I mean, if they go in the Kurd area, they have no sort of.
Would you like to say something on what Ambassador Kalha was saying, or you were saying that they want to create an emirate, essentially in the Sunni-dominated areas, Anbar, Nineveh,
contiguous
Salahuddin,
areas, also of Syria,
across the border.
So
they get strategic depth in both while attacking Baghdad and attacking Damascus.
This is the kind of virus which keeps on mutating. You see. Today,
viruses don't have strategy. These people have strategy. They have a certain vision. You may disagree with it.
No, I'm talking of the original virus, which has mutated into a Nasara and in this kind of thing. You see, earlier certain regimes were supporting these things. Now, ideologically, these will be against any kingdoms. You see, Saudi Arabs and Arab will have the same kind of issue with them as they are having with Muslim Brotherhood.
Is there an attempt to create this emirate which is straddling the two borders so that they get strategic depth in their attacks against Baghdad and Damascus?
You must remember the Iraq-Syrian border is an artificial border. It is drawn up by the colonial powers at the end of the First World War. So therefore you have people of the same kind, the same tribe living on both sides. And very often they would cross over because when you go there is nothing. It's just plain desert. You just walk across. There is no barrier or of any kind which indicates that this is Iraq and that is Syria. It's only when you enter a town that you get to know which country you are in. And therefore, the kind of situation that prevails now is that what they have really done is basically enlarge the area of their control. And whether it is half Syria or quarter Syria and 1/4 Iraq doesn't make a difference on the ground because basically these are tribal areas. And most of the tribes go from one end to the other, to the other, to the other. And the barrier in between, the artificial line, was drawn by the colonial powers. It really is of no consequence.
Okay. Now, let me ask you something about how India should view these developments in Syria. Largely because will these developments, suppose this Islamic emirate is created in that region, will it embolden terrorists in and around India?
It will embolden terrorists all over West Asia And in the neighborhood of West Asia,
Afghanistan.
that is Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, it is bad for all of us. This is one of the very few cases of what is emerging where true international cooperation is possible. The West, the East, GCC, Iran, everybody is hurt by what is happening.
But we don't see that cooperation.
No, it will emerge.
It will emerge.
It will emerge.
No. We are not seeing that cooperation. Perhaps that is because of some kind of a short-sightedness.
But it will emerge.
Because you see, if the sort of Salafi kingdoms cannot reconcile themselves to Muslim Brotherhood, how will they reconcile with this, which is a much more radical than Al-Zawahiri? Because you see, the leader,
That is what I am saying.
the leader
We will,
of this movement has revolted against Al-Zawahiri also. I mean, compared to him, Al-Zawahiri is a moderate.
Exactly. Al-Qaeda has actually expelled them. But let me ask you one last question as we are running out of time. I'll begin with you. A quick one-line answer.
Yeah.
Are we likely to see a similar mess in Afghanistan when the US pulls out completely by 2016?
I think the two situations can't be compared, but at the same time, there are a lot of similarities also. Firstly, both are tribal sort of countries with very strong tribal affiliations.
No, but will we see a situation? Yes or no? Because we don't have a lot of time to analyze.
I am not so sure.
Okay. Ambassador
I
Gupta?
don't think it will be quite as bad as what has happened in Iraq. Iraq is a particularly bad case, and I expect that it will not be as bad, and I'm almost certain that it will not be as bad.
Mahdi, last words.
Well, I'm not very sure because you see, what is going on in Afghanistan, one has to be very careful.
Okay. So thank you very much for coming here and sharing your analysis of this complex situation with our viewers. That's all we have for you today. We'll be back again next week with another interesting issue. Till then, goodbye and thanks for watching.